All right, Myron, thanks so much for taking the time with me. So, right after 1 a.m., this news comes down. What's your reaction to the Gophers moving on from Ben Johnson?
Unfortunately, I wasn't surprised because I just know the Gophers' history, kind of what they are when it comes to men's basketball. Um, I didn't think it was the right decision. That's not for me to decide because I just don't know what people expect. The truth is, Ben was operating with one of the lower um, budgets in college basketball in terms of NIL, right? So there's that element of things. So I think that's an issue. You talk about uh, what's a reasonable expectation for a coach in his position, and I don't know if people understand how hard it is to win right now. Um, and then just the investment hasn't been there, not even just for Ben, for so many coaches before Ben. So I just I don't know what the University of Minnesota wants in a coach. But unless they're willing to seriously invest in the product, it'll be the same result with whoever they hire.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think last season it seemed like he built some momentum. They finished 4 games above 500, and then kind of regressed this year, even though there was a little bit of like, okay, maybe, with 7 quad 1 wins, but ultimately, first round exit, one and done in the Big Ten tournament, finishing with a losing record, and it just seemed to doom his time there. Even though, after the game, he was talking about diving back into recruiting. How tough is that?
It's hard. I mean, it's a cold world, man, for coaches, right? I mean, in the middle of the night. I mean, I don't know when he told them. They announced it in the middle of the night. We don't know exactly when Ben was told, but it is a cold world. You can have your job today, not tomorrow. I think the unfortunate element of this is, and Ben had talked about this, is with the NIL world, when you don't have the money, and mind you, all these players who've left Minnesota is because Minnesota didn't have NIL money, right? They weren't able to afford to keep up with the Joneses. It's not that hard to figure out. Imagine a world where the Timberwolves were in the NBA, but were spending, let's say, 60% compared to what the other NBA teams were spending on their rosters. What do you think happens? Right? What if they can't sign Anthony Edwards? What if they can't sign the other stars on the team? That's what Ben was dealing with. Why I think it's a mistake is because rev sharing starts next year. And Ben has talked about this. Now there's a world where maybe you level the playing field a little bit because now each league is going to say, here's the money you can spend on talent. And the schools are directly involved now. Will there still be NIL on some level? But NIL will become far more complicated. So this will be almost like a salary cap system. And I think you have to give Ben an opportunity to recruit in that landscape when things are more even out. So, but it ain't Ben. It's Richard Pitino, Mountain West Coach of the Year. It's Tubby Smith, who came here with a ring. The reality is the University of Minnesota is not serious about men's basketball. And everybody knows it. I travel the country. I've seen every arena in the country of significance. I've been to every major campus in America. They don't look like this. So you want Ben to walk on water, turn water into wine, and get you into the tournament? Good luck, and good luck to whoever they hire because I think it'll be the same challenges.
Why don't you think the commitment is there for the Gophers with the basketball team? It seems like they've given PJ far greater resources with the football team than they have with the basketball program. What is it? Since 2019, since they've had a tournament appearance.
I don't think the Twin Cities. I don't think this is a basketball town. And as much as people are talking about the Timberwolves right now, I've been around a long time, man. I've been here 20 years, 20 plus years. There've been a whole lot of stretches where they weren't talking about the Timberwolves like that. So I think in general that's the biggest thing. This is a Twins Vikings town. St. Paul's a wild town. But I think college basketball just isn't something this community loves the same way they did 30, 40 years ago. The problem is everybody's talking about the past when it comes to college basketball. There's so much nostalgia, which is why everybody loves the barn. No kid's gonna walk into the barn, 100-year-old arena, and go, "Wow, I want to play there." Not an elite talent, because you have to go see the other arenas around the country. They're incredible. And unless you have like Allen Fieldhouse or Cameron Indoor Stadium or some venue where there is a legend attached to the building itself, you're not recruiting off of that. You've got to build something. So I think this is a Gophers community. Now, mind you, to their credit as fans, they haven't had a ton to cheer about, you know? So that's another element. When you haven't won consistently for 30 years or whatever it's been, it's hard. Like Minnesota basketball has missed an entire generation when it comes to building fans. So I think that's obviously a major factor. The lack of success. I think the nostalgia element where people still think it's 1973, and just overall not a real love for men's basketball across the board.
So there have been a lot of Gopher fans talking about Mark Coyle and him continuing to get raises and him continuing to be able to construct the athletics at the U. What's your thoughts on the job that Mark Coyle is doing?
I mean, he's going to be judged like every AD by football. I mean, and I think PJ is doing what should be expected in the Big Ten at a school like the University of Minnesota. Um, I don't know enough about the other sports locally, but I mean, at the University of Minnesota, but I think with basketball, there just hasn't been a real investment. I'll tell you about Tubby Smith, who I covered, when he first started. That was my first year at the Star Tribune covering Tubby Smith. And Tubby said he was promised a practice facility on the plane to Minnesota. Minnesota built it a decade later, right? So for me, if you're Mark Coyle, what's the investment? What did you give Ben to win? There wasn't any NIL money, not compared to the other schools. If you look at success across college basketball, it's not that hard to figure out. The teams that got money are winning. The teams that invested in basketball are winning. And those that didn't have the money, now granted, there are some situations where people spent and they didn't win. Ain't a whole lot of situations where people spent big and didn't get anything in return. So what did Mark Coyle do to convince those donors to give to men's basketball, to put that investment in men's basketball? Where's the push for a new arena? Because someone should be making that. You're not going to recruit elite players to Minnesota with a 100-year-old building that has no real mythical status except to the people who were here in the 1970s and 80s and watched those games. Man, this is pre-color TV, some of this stuff y'all talk about. Pre-cell phone. You know what I mean? Cats were still playing Game Boys and Ataris and stuff. Like, that's not today. So I think Mark Coyle, in terms of men's basketball, has not modernized this game, has not done enough to understand or at least offer the investment that's necessary to win now.
So with all that being said, where does the program go from here? Like, what type of coach can they realistically expect to be able to recruit to come to Minnesota?
They need a GM. I mean, today so much is fundraising, so much is being in front of the boosters and donors, and you almost have to be a politician in a lot of ways. Now, again, rev sharing I think will change a lot of things. Like rev sharing is going to make it so like you won't be in the same circumstances that you were in when it came to raising money for NIL. But I also think you have to be able to now convince the kid who's on his way to Indiana or Illinois for a certain amount of money. Maybe he's getting the same amount of money from those schools. Okay, what makes Minnesota stand out? How do you sell this thing? You need somebody who can sell the program. I just don't know how you do that. when you consider that there's not a lot to look forward to in terms of the investment in the program. You can't say we're building a new arena. You can't say there's this incredible investment on the way. Ben Johnson was a high school football and basketball star here in the Twin Cities. Like Ben Johnson played at the University of Minnesota, coached as an assistant at the University of Minnesota, came back as a head coach. You can't be more tied in to the University of Minnesota community or the Twin Cities than he was. And yet, they got rid of him. So you bring in someone, how did they succeed? Who takes this job and feels like you can turn it into something? But I think you need someone with an energy that really changes the fan base and just the culture.
All right, Myron, I appreciate you taking the time with me.